Another method of getting to a data business strategy is actually by looking at the data sources that you have available. This is not the optimal way because you're kind of building with what you have, not with what you would ideally want, but it's another method. So how does it go? You give me any business. I remember my students gave me a Tako chain, a famous chain of restaurants that had multiple locations, multiple cities, etc. It was a large chain, but basically like a franchise business where they all are cookie cutters and they all look the same. So inside a restaurant, there's a lot of different data points that you can measure. Put cameras and see how people are reacting to the actual food. You can also put IoT sensors and start measuring people's weight as they come in the door. Sorry, but it's just, you'll see how we're going to use that data now. It's kind of weird, but yes, that is important for the people going into a restaurant. You can also obviously have image recognition in terms of are they men, are they women? You can do inferences with certain algorithms so you can figure out their age. You actually can get a full profile, so demographic and gender, do certain assumptions on ethnicity. I know, you're profiling. I know what you're thinking, but don't worry, this is all for a good cause. Obviously, you have all the information of what they ordered and how they reacted, if they left food on the plate, how much did they leave, what percentage of the food was consumed, how fast, what were the accompanying, was it a family, was it a couple? So you have all the times, and were they dressed business, were they dressed casual, so was it a personal, was it a business? You get all sorts of data points. So this technique really calls for kind of looking at the data first and trying to figure out the strategy from the data. So from the insights that the data generates, you're going to try to pull forward, of course. And this is very important. AI is not going to do the strategy for you. You kind of have to know what data to ask for and what to look for. And all that goes back to your intent. Depending on your intent and the lenses of how you're viewing this world, this business, it's really gonna bias, positively or negatively, how you look at the data and how you analyze it. We've put cameras, we've done facial recognition to identify if it's men, women, what age. We've done inferences on Hispanic, gender, race, blah, blah, blah. And now we also have their weight and what they've actually consumed, who they've consumed it with, what were they wearing, dress code, were they casual? So here comes the interesting part. We run the numbers, and it turns out a large percentage of your revenues come from a small group. 60-70% of your revenues come from 20% of your customers. These customers love your brand. You can now identify how often they come because you have their faces. So you know that they come 2-3 times a week. You're like, oh my God, you know how much they spend every time they come. They keep bringing different types of people. They keep bringing business people. They keep bringing people that look like family. Basically, they love you, and they come with people from work and with people from their personal lives. Now, this is something that if you don't ask for this information, you're not going to get it. What's your philosophy for business? If you believe that businesses that do good also do well, then you would ask the following question. But this, of course, this is where leadership comes in. This is where your business philosophy comes in, because a lot of people won't ask for this information. But if you are concerned, when you look at that video from the customers that come often, they're coming 2-3 times a week, that represent 50, 60, 70% of your revenue, just like your AI team created inferences, whether people were business or social, or whether they were from a certain ethnic group or another, you can actually ask them, because you can train an algorithm on image recognition to basically tell you if people are obese or if they're not obese, relative to their height, etc., their body shape. And you can even have the algorithm calculate people's BMI index, so body mass and all that, how much fat they have in their bodies. So I have bad news for you. We did the numbers, and it turns out that 80% of your top clients, the one that are representing a large chunk of your revenues, are obese. And you're a taco chain, and most of your food is really, plates are over 1,000 calories each. So now, what do? You have 50, 60 locations across the country, and you just found out that your primary consumer is obese, and that your plates are actually contributing to their obesity. Because of the amount of time they spend in your restaurant and the amount of food they consume every time, you're actually able to calculate the calories that each of these clients orders every time they come to your restaurant. And they order more than they should for the entire day. So more than their caloric intake for the entire day is what they order in one sitting. So you find out you're actually contributing to the possible early death of your customers, your best customers, because if they continue at this rate, they're going to die of heart attack and cholesterol. And so what should you do? Some of you might say that ignorance is bliss, and it was great when we didn't know, and we would just keep on selling tacos. But that's not a good strategy going into the AI era. Why? Well, because they were going to find out anyway. Some new app that was going to be scanning all their food. Either they would take pictures of their food and every time they sat, and the algorithms would calculate the calories, and they would eventually find out that they were consuming too many calories at your restaurant. And when their health problems would have started to show, metabolic syndrome, high blood pressure, diabetes, obesity, etc., they would have eventually abandoned you. They would have let you go because you would be a bad relationship to them. Your best customers would abandon you because you would be a bad influence on them. Think about that. So it's actually great. You found out because of the data. This can make you change your menu or bring in, I don't know, light tortillas and light beer. Whatever it takes to reduce the calorie intake. Maybe you start nudging people. You create like a discounted menu that is low on calories for those people that come often. Maybe with their loyalty cards, you give them a discount, but only on certain items. So you start nudging them towards the healthier alternatives. So when they find out through another service app that they are consuming too many calories per day, that you're not going to get blamed for it. In fact, you're going to be seen as part of the solution because now they can keep on coming to your restaurant without incurring in being overweight. So that's how you use, but again, that inference, that last inference is not your normal typical data run. That's something that you as a leader would have had to ask for specifically because you had that concern and because you wanted to make sure that you were doing good by your customers. You don't ask for it, you're not going to get it. AI is not going to do your strategy. AI is not going to do your strategy. The good news is that you implement all these new dishes and menus and calories, and you change things around, and you keep on measuring. You see the reaction, and you see if they order the plates, and you see if they're actually taking the promotions, if they're reacting well to this being nudged. That's how you measure the effectiveness, by looking at the reaction. So you're creating a sensory system, and we're going to see this when we look at Maurice Conti. He's an incredible speaker, and we're going to give you the details about him. He basically advocates for the creation of sensory systems. So using data as a human sensory system so that they can tell your brain what decisions to make. And that's what we did here. We created data measurements around the different parts of the business so that we could get sensory information, and from the sensory information we could make decisions. Now, again, the only con of this method that I foresee is that the data that you have is not necessarily always the data that you need. Sometimes you have to look outside for the data that you need. So not only do you have to install sensors inside your restaurant, but you may need to do things outside as well. Check weather patterns, school calendar, economic indicators, data outside of your restaurant experience. But putting a sensory system inside your direct customer experience is not a bad idea at all. And just looking at what you see, I highly recommend it, but it's not the full AI kind of component. And it's not what you get when you do the essence detection methodology. This whole doing well by doing good, we're going to dive into that a lot. I really believe that with all the data and all the sensors and all the indicators and all the measurements and the as-a-service companies, that we're going to have more data on ourselves than we've ever had in the history of basically humans. So what that means is that you're going to be expected to do good because people are going to be more self-aware than ever before. If you're a business that's just looking out for themselves, that's not taking care of the environment, not taking care of people, that's contributing to, obesity or diabetes, you're not going to survive because the data is going to smoke you out. The data is going to be pointing fingers at your business, and people are going to move on because they're not going to want a bad relationship. Not when it becomes extremely clear the level of damage brought on by that use of that product or service. Now you may say, look, the people are smoking, and yeah, there's a whole chapter on addictions and AI that we could go into. But for the most part, I really think coming into an era where informed decisions are going to be the norm, people will have more data than they need and more insights than probably you'd want. And if you don't start by really getting to understand your own customer experience with your own customers, other apps and other companies will do it for you. The problem is you won't have access to that data. Only your customers will. And based on that data, they will decide if they want to continue the relationship with you or not. Think of it as those, at the beginning when the boom of the internet started, a lot of businesses came out that were doing price comparisons, with travel and things like that and hotels. And those became, really good businesses. I think the same is going to happen. There's going to be services that are going to be comparing. So like the Zagats of the future and the open tables of the future, they may be providing much more than just information about the price and the decor. You know what I mean? You might be in for a surprise if you're a restaurant that's not really keeping with the times, the trends in terms of caloric intake and healthy foods and slow cooking or whatnot. And so that's how a taco chain is done with data. I hope you enjoyed it. We're gonna do many more exercises like this. Stay tuned.